sincere people, and some were not, I know, on the extremes,
Well,
but some, go ahead.
You had communists, you
Yeah.
had neo-Nazis in New York.
And of course, they had their own axe to
That's
grind.
right. And everybody was like going in a different direction. It was like a cat with 20 tails.
Before we get into that, because you're from New York, you get a kind of an opportunity to sometimes see. Did you ever see any famous sports people, like Joe Louis or any of those folks?
Oh, yeah. Babe Ruth.
Did you get a
Lou
chance to
Gehrig.
see? Well, let's spend a moment on it. Where did you happen to see Babe Ruth?
Saw him at Yankee Stadium.
Playing, or was he
playing?
He was. Oh, all right.
He was playing.
So tell us your impressions. Now he's getting on by this time, or isn't he yet?
Oh yeah, he played his last game in 1934, and he went to another team. I'm just trying to think which team he went to.
I can't remember.
And then he came back to the Brooklyn Dodgers.
He did.
He came back to the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1938 or 39.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He played for a year and then became a coach for a year or so with them. And then he was gone.
Of course, you're seeing him at the kind of
tail end.
Tail end.
Yeah.
How did people treat? I mean, everybody knew that his day had passed. Did people boo him or anything? I hope not.
Never.
I mean, you know.
Never booed him.
Yeah.
But I think the saddest episode in sports was Lou Gehrig at that last game.
All right, did you happen to be at that
I was at the
stadium?
Yankee Stadium that day.
If you would, tell us about that.
And it was unreal because here he had played all those 2,000 games consecutively, sometimes hurting and everything else, that he got into the lineup on the road a couple of times and batted first, and then came out of the game just so long as he kept that streak going.
Sure.
And then you could see the deterioration in the last few months. As a matter of fact, I think the deterioration started the season before.
Because he had what we call Lou Gehrig's disease,
Yeah.
I mean, now named after him. And so you were there for that dramatic and very sad moment,
Right.
when he bid farewell to his fans.
He was an unreal athlete. He wasn't as flamboyant as Ruth, but I think he was great. Well, he was a New York boy. That was
Not that you're prejudiced.
That's right.
Now, I'm a little bit younger than you, but one of my great heroes, listening to the radio, was Joe Louis. Did you ever get a chance to see Joe Louis box?
I saw him fight.
Do you remember who he boxed at?
I saw him when he beat Schmeling.
You did?
Yeah.
The second time?
The second time.
Well, that must have been, I'd love to have been with that crowd.
Well, that was the fastest knockout that they had on record. That was
Was
gone.
it at that?
Yeah. He was gone in the first round. He hit him like 5 times and Schmeling was down, and that was it.
And I'm trying to think of who was that announcer that he always carried all those games. I can't think of his name, but he got so excited.
Dumphy?
Yes, that was it.
Dumphy, yeah.
Didn't he? I'm trying to think of the word. Smedling's down, and he got.
Yeah, unreal.
That would have been an exciting moment to see. Do you remember who the other fight was that you saw? Because for a time, Louis had what he called the bum of the month type of thing. I mean, in his prime, he was just taking these fellas on.
He almost lost the fight to Billy Conn.
Did you happen to see that fight?
No,
I listened to it on
the newsreels and
I listened to it on the radio. What an exciting fight that was.
Billy Conn was the champ if he would have stayed away from him that round.
Is that right? That was.
He had beat him by points.
It was one of the moments of sports history.
That's right.
What do you think of Joe Louis? I mean, he seemed like a very nice person.
Yeah, well, I met him in the Army.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I met him in Africa. And he was a plain, down-to-earth boy who really rose to greatness just on sheer integrity and his own guts. And these guys today couldn't get away with anything if he was still in the ring the way they get away with today.
I know they have these computer things today, you know, these matching of fights, but I don't want to go into that, but I happen to be a big Joe Louis fan. Well, now, finally, it's December 7th, 1941, and you are how old?
Oh,
let's see.
I was 18.
18, so the draft didn't come immediately. But tell us, now what happened?
Well, some of my friends enlisted, and my mother raised the roof because I tried to enlist. And at that point, if you were under 21, you needed a parent's signature. I went down to join the Marines, and and I don't know why, I just couldn't pass the eye test. So they rejected me. Then I went down to join the Navy, and I memorized the eye chart. And they switched eye charts on me.
Oh, they did?
They
I've never known that
switched
anybody
eye
ever did that. I thought those charts were standard.
No, they switched eye charts just as I got up to the line.
You know who else cheated was Harry Truman in World War I on the eye charts, but they didn't switch the chart on him. So anyway, of course you couldn't.
I couldn't pass it.
Now, did you go to Whitehall Street?
No.
No, because
I was inducted at Grand Central Palace.
Oh, okay. Now, Grand Central Palace, is
It
that?
was 45th Street and Lexington Avenue.
And tell us a little bit about that building. I'm not familiar with that.
Big, massive. That was a showcase building where they had expositions at the time and shows and all different things. And this was the end of 1942.
So,
when I was examined.
Mr. Miller, they were obviously still rejecting people in 42 because later on, I think the...
Well, I would have passed the eye test for the Marines 3 months later if I would have gone back.
Because they had lowered the...
They had lowered the standards.
This was, the need for people,
right.
Of course. Was, so there you are. What were you... I was thinking about employment. If I have a young man at 18, I'm not too happy because he's going to disappear on me.
Well, I had a friend, my father's friend, who had a couple of laundry routes up in Harlem. Well, we won't go into that. We delivered towels, sheets, and pillowcases to all the bordellos.
Did you? Well, besides that, did you go to the Apollo by any chance? The famous.
Oh, well, we used to go dancing in the Savoy Ballroom on 7th Avenue.
Oh, wow.
But you were safe on the streets in Harlem at that time.
Absolutely. I mean, Harlem was really had a renaissance in the 20s and into
it was unreal.
It was very
Nobody
nice.
bothered you.
Yeah, I understand.
And when I used to make my deliveries, as soon as I pulled on the street in East Harlem, I didn't even have to worry about taking the keys out of the ignition of the truck. The kids knew that I was delivering into the area, in the buildings that some of them might have lived in. Never bothered the truck or anything.
But that's a whole story in itself.
That's a story in itself.
So anyway, so you're delivering, of course,
yeah.
And the war is going on, and
right. And then, of course, all my friends were gone, and because I was already registered for the draft, I couldn't enlist. They wouldn't let me go and enlist.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I volunteered through the draft board.
What was the reason for that, Mr. Miller?
Because they were working strictly through the draft then. They had already taken all the National Guard units, and whatever enlistees they took right up until a certain cutoff date in the middle of 1942.
I see.
And I went to the draft board and told them, well, let me go. I don't have anybody home. And that was the situation. And
well, the call finally came when?
At the latter part of 1942. I went to Grand Central Palace. From there they took us to Fort Dix.
All right, if we'll stay just a moment, because for a time, and correct me on this, Mr. Miller, but they might take, you're standing in line, that's ongoing. The first 50 fellows might go in the Marines, more or less, and the next 50 went in the Navy, and so
That's
forth.
how they worked.
Is that they
That's
were working?
Exactly how they worked.
At this time.
At that time.
At the end of 42.
Right.
All right, and so there you go. The physical wasn't that rough, I assume.
Physical was nothing. If you coughed and breathed, they took you.
Right. All right, so off you go to Fort Dix. And you're what, 20 now, or 21?
19.
You're 19 at this time. And of course, what happened at Fort Dix? Did you have basic there or not?
No. They gave you your uniforms.
Of course, that's New Jersey.
Yeah, they gave you your uniforms, your shots, and your AGCT.
Now, what's that?
The Army General Classification Test. That's to see what you were fitted for. Of course, it was like a farce.
Yeah. They
took a look at you and they figured, well, we need 10,000 riflemen.
You're right.
If you had a college education or not, you were a rifleman. And that's how they took you. 4 or 5 days later, they shipped me down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training.
Oh, you went, and this was for basic training?
Right.
Was just for everyone at the moment? It wasn't infantry or anything at the moment, just basic training?
No, it was infantry.
It was infantry?
Right.
All right. Now, it's interesting, when you went south, and of course, many people were black, you know, from the north. Did they immediately segregate? How did they do that?
Yeah, the military was segregated. We went into town after 21 days.
Well, let's see, when you went south, I'm a black soldier, we'll say, from New York. I mean, I've just been, I've been at Fort Dix.
You went into a black unit.
Did you go down separately on trains already?
No.
You
We
went
were in
down
different
mixed.
cars.
Oh, different cars.
Different cars. In other words, whites in one car, blacks in another.
I just want to spend a little time on it because it's an era that's passed, and maybe we should, in a way, remember this. Again, I'm a black New Yorker, and I've really maybe never been south. You know, it doesn't mean too much to me. Did the trains leave New York already segregated, or leave Fort Dix already segregated?
Oh yeah, there was segregation in the military at that.
Oh no, I see. Even that's right. Even at Fort Dix.
Segregation in the military.
In other words, I'm a black fellow, and you go to Company C or whatever, and it's already segregated.
You were already.
Already separated.
Very few blacks went into fighting units.
Yes.
At that time. They were strictly quartermaster,
Transportation.
MPs, none in chemical warfare that I could remember.
But I'm just wondering, it must have been a little, you know, young people are a little naive and so on. It must have been a little bit of a shock for some of these people that.
Well, we went into Columbia, South Carolina, which was a segregated city, and when we got to the center of town, and there was a big statue in the center of town, that was the borderline. We couldn't cross into the black neighborhood. It was off limits.
And vice versa,
of course. Vice versa.
All right, now there you are at for basic training. How long was the training?
13 weeks.
13 weeks. This is just about standard for the military, until they get desperate, and I guess they cut it down. Did they cut it down later?
During the Bulge.
And they cut it to what?
6 weeks.
6 weeks for these fellows going in at this time, which is... All right, so there you are, 13 weeks. Well, tell us a little bit about it. I mean, basic is something I think you have to go through as an experience. Some are humorous incidents and some are not.
You can't describe it.
No,
You can't. I mean, being a city person, the first night in the woods, I caught poison ivy. And I caught poison ivy in the most awful spot you can imagine.
Oh, no.
And, well, they took me on sick call. They gave me Shuttl's mixture for the poison ivy, gave me 6 aspirins, 2 for the morning, 2 for the night, and 2 for the next morning, and come back tomorrow morning, and that was it.
You trained with what type of rifle?
We had the M1, the Garand.
Oh, you did have the M1?
Yeah.
Not the old Springfield.
I got it at Springfield because I fired expert on the range, and they gave me a sharpshooter's rifle with a scope.
Unfair question, Mr. Miller. It really is unfair, but I have to ask. How good was the and now we're looking back many years. How good was the training? All terrible, medium, or good, or whatever you want to comment. I mean, you're going to risk your life. You know.
I think it was good in proportion to what they had to work with. They were taking everybody, youngsters, old men. We had guys in our training company that were 38 years old, 39 years old. Fathers with a couple of children, and it was a haphazard thing. And here we 18s, 19s, and they were getting the same physical training that they were. They couldn't keep up. They would fall by the wayside. They would get transferred out into another unit until, after a while, they just started to cut back. They started to discharge all those people above 35.
They did?
Yeah.
I see. Well, of course, you're a young fellow. Now, I assume you were gung-ho.
Well,
or am I wrong?
It wasn't that I was gung-ho. I was a flip New York kid down south dealing with Southerners who, in my estimation, weren't as smart as me. Meanwhile, they outsmarted me every time around the block.
So you became, during basic, a rifleman then?
Well, I had 3 MOSs.
What's an
military occupation specialty.
All right.
While I was there, I drove for a 1-star general